Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. This is really, really special. As I say every week when I'm here, thank you for everyone who continues to be loyal to this and to our moderators who put in so much effort to make it wonderful. I'm so delighted that Kira's on stage with me today. She does such a terrific job for the community, a lot of times behind the scenes, in addition to interacting with a lot of you. But I'm so happy that she came in front of the camera today for this very, very special guest. So, Josh Jacobs is just such a cool guy. And before I introduce him, I want to say one of the things that many of you know that is really precious to me is the organic way that some of the hosts come here for the show. So, I had a relationship with a gentleman named Tim Studler, who's BD at Mattel, who couldn't be a lovelier guy. And through that and his support and the Mattel team's support, got to know Josh better and just realized how much that whole org cares about our community and helping folks. And so Josh has really seen so much, a real solid veteran, starting out in roles that were not games based, even at places, for example, like Audi, but more recently at places that many of you, of course, do know, like Mattel, like Activision, Blizzard King. And so I think we'll get a really interesting perspective here, both from really as core as it gets, games experiences, but also other experiences as well. And so let me let you come on here. Actually, hold on. Kira, let me let you just say a quick word about yourself for a moment, and then I'll let Josh do his intro. Kira, please say a word about yourself.
Oh, hi. My name is Kira. I am a graduate of Full Sail University. I have a master's in game design. Um, Other than that, I'm a mom, a wife, and I help moderate the ASGC Discord server.
Thank you so much, Kira. And now we'll go over right to our guest, Josh. Josh, please say a little bit about yourself and kind of, what your journey getting all the way up to here and your new amazing role this year at Mattel.
Certainly. Well, thank you all for having me, Kira. I can relate to the parental stages of life. Before the call, I mean, I think everybody here heard of Noah, my 2.5-year-old. But my story is really about pursuit of alignment of passion and profession, and really it took a little bit of time to really find what that skill set was. There was always that voice in the back of my head saying, "You really like networking. You really enjoy helping people." There's no better sales job that fuses those two together than a recruitment job. So it all started in the Bay Area with a staffing agency called K-Force. And then from K-Force, that led to an Audi opportunity with a small team in San Francisco where we were trained by a lot of the leadership team out in Ingolstadt in Michigan. And it was really best in class training, really ramping up this mobility project. And there was an opportunity to take on recruitment and build the team of brand ambassadors there. So that was a fantastic opportunity, and that led to an opportunity to co-found my own app. So I think there's also a piece of me that is entrepreneurial driven and scrappy and loves this startup-y feel and startup-y pace and agile and ambiguity that comes with it. So I dabbled in a little venture for a bit, made a little bit of a splash that led to actually meeting with Hip Hop Gamer, who Amir, you and I just saw at GamesBeat last week. So it was fun to see an old friend. That didn't work out as planned, but I look at it as my MBA program, which then opened up the door to go back to the digital agency world, which was really, really a catapulting opportunity for me. And that digital agency was called AKQA. And I started as an account executive to really test the waters of like what it's like to be front and center sales. But it was way more data driven than I anticipated it to be. And there was an opportunity 7 months in to get to know the VP of talent there and really segue back into my bread and butter of recruitment. So I was there for a while, and then a very unique opportunity popped up where the team that I actually staffed internally for AKQA started to get poached internally and in-house, as this is a common theme in the digital agency world, where if you're a very strong talent, you're going to get poached by your client. And a lot of the team I built was working with Activision at the time. A lot of them got poached and they said, "Hey, who's the recruiter working with you?" So by nature, I followed suit, and I thought I was going to be there my entire career. It was an amazing journey. I love everybody there. I still keep in touch with them today. Our current CSO at Mattel, he's from Activision as well, Ken. And there's just a lot of strong talent that comes out of that place. And the opportunity that I left for was with TikTok. And I thought I was going to be there as quick as the the name sounds, a TikTok moment, but it lasted 5 years. And, I started considering what to do after that. And Mattel reached out to me around the end of last year. And here we are. And I could not be more enthusiastic about what they're building. It just kind of fuses all of those experiences together that I just covered. And I can't wait to answer a lot of questions today and help all of you.
That's a great background, Josh. Whenever we start, I always try to have a few questions that I've thought about during the week or two, and I was certainly getting very excited for this one with you. That's really kind of customized to the person in that seat. And here's what I'll ask you to kick us off, which is, can you give us a sense of, you could depersonalize this from Mattel specifically or any role if you like, but like, what is it like sitting in your chair? Like, something I get from candidates all the time is they ask me, what is it like to be a talent acquisition person in 2026 in like the Captain Kirk chair? Like, are you seeing like 800 applications per person? Is it just like a complete blur? Are you getting like 5,000 messages a week? Like, what does it feel like being in your role and try to look at and process and deal with all these candidates from day to day and week to week?
I love that question. So I'll say this: at any company that you join as a talent acquisition professional, there's an expectation and there's an accountability. And that expectation to your leadership team and all of the hiring managers that you partner with, you're taking on that responsibility of now consulting them on what the market is doing, how the market is reacting, what's happening in live time with legalities. Certain states, for example, like New York and California, they've opened up Pandora's box with compensation bans being listed publicly now, which I personally have always thought that needed to happen. I know it's, there's another side of that, but I've always found that being transparent in my seat with candidates from the very first call sets the expectation up for the rest of the recruitment process. So I will say it's an empowering seat, but there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And there's a lot of accountability. And, there's different features on LinkedIn, for example, where you can automate a message and you can automate a response. But I just know it's not realistic to respond to every single inbox. But when I carve out the dedicated windows to do that, I make sure I treat that individual and that candidate like I would anybody else not doing my job. And that's just being a human, hearing their story and asking all of them, if you were to close your eyes and envision your next world or role, what would that entail? And if they can answer that clearly with a narrative that ties perfectly into what I'm hiring for, then we're setting you up for success. And now it's, again, my accountability and my responsibility to now prepare you as much as I'm preparing the leadership team to evaluate the true value of what they're lacking. So, I think that's a fantastic question, but that's transferable to any company that you're working for. I will say, the more startup-y, less Batman logo in the sky presence of a company makes the role a little bit more difficult because now you're fishing. You're going out there, you're actively sourcing, and there's a heavy sourcing strategy and employer branding component that is really tied into your recruitment strategy. And you'll be measured by the end of the year and at the 6-month point if you're pacing towards the headcount plan that was approved. Whereas if you have a bigger Batman logo in the sky, like I experienced with Activision or, even AKQA amongst the digital talent and digital creative world, it really held value. But K-Force was that boiler room opportunity where I was making 75 to 80 cold calls a day and just trying to make any client that I was able to secure at that moment the biggest and best brand that they could possibly work for. So, yeah, I think that's a fantastic question to start.
That's interesting. And I'll ask one more, which is, there's obviously no one size fits all, but we like to ask variants of this to a lot of TA recruiting people who come on, which is, if you think of like the last, I'm picking a number out of the air, 20, 30, 40 candidates that ended up getting hired, and you try to think about what things they had in common. When you're looking at those candidates, anywhere from the screening stage to when they're actually full on in the interview process, what are some attributes that you could put out there? And feel free to list as many as you like, that you're like, oh yeah, like when I see that, that's terrific. In either the way the person represents themselves on paper, the way that they talk, the way that they interview, anything.
Yeah, so currently the common thread for hiring has been mobile gaming experience, whereas we see a ton of AAA PC console experience, which I'm always trying to extract the transferable narrative and also make up for the lack of mobile gaming experience when presenting after a healthy conversation with a candidate to my hiring team. Like, hey, there's a lot of transferable narratives there. Now, it's also my responsibility to extract what stage we're at as a division within a larger corporation. So I would say, for candidates, that may be facing this blocker or this Mario wall that pops up out of nowhere when applying for jobs, it's super important and super keen to really be able to showcase not only the value of your skills, that's the given, right? You could gamify your keywords on your LinkedIn persona on your page to the job description that's catching your eye and that's of interest and something that really is sticky to you. But we're hired to really sort through the minutia of, are you really able to sit in this role and hit the ground running with the most minimal amount of hands-on experience and training needed within a 90-day window? Or is this going to take an investment from the company and from the leader to then really lean in a little bit more than maybe their schedule could accommodate? And they're really evaluating if this individual has done the job before and now this is a ladder up for them, or are they hit at the glass ceiling of their current employer and they still want a continuation and more reps in their current role? And maybe this opportunity could offer more compensation, or maybe this opportunity just gives you an opportunity to perform at a larger scale. So those are the attributes that I'm really focused on. Is the story lining up? Have they done their research on the company? And furthermore, have they done their research on this division in this department, from anything of news articles that they could reference in their interviews with me, or any content online that surfaced their way? Like, I get a ton of references to Masters of the Universe, which everybody on this call should go see next week. And, it showcases just a little bit more chippiness and eagerness and understanding of where we are as a company and what we're trying to implement.
That's great. I can see it happens. Sometimes we have a waxing and waning of questions, and some nights are quiet. So I'm just going to keep asking questions. And Kira, you chime in definitely too as we go. So, Josh, what about and believe me, I have plenty of them. Can you demystify for me? People ask me all the time, so if I get a referral for a job, how much weight does that actually get? How much does it matter? Is there some really discrete thing of how quality the referral is and so forth? Maybe as much as you can. Again, I know there's no one size fits all. Demystify for our audience the cold applicant versus the referred applicant, how much it matters, why, and where.
The referral the weight depends on who it's coming from. I think that's the obvious answer, right? But furthermore, once the referral is in the system, it's also on that individual who put the referral in to really ladder up the urgency around who's being brought to the table, what they've done in the past, and why they would be such a great mold to what we've already established. And that's the truth behind demystifying that. It's really, who is the individual, how long have they been at the company, and how far up the ladder can they escalate? So, for example, at GDC, some of our more senior leadership on the tech side, nieces, nephews, cousins, they're going to be at GDC. You should absolutely meet with them. I know the weight that they hold, and I know how long they've been at the company, and we owe it to that individual to say, you know what, I'll carve out time. Even if I know on the resume front it's not going to work, I'll still carve out the time and I'll still check off the box. And a common theme of today's conversation will be your network is everything, and how you treat individuals will always be remembered. So that is one thing that I will say. The weighting depends on the length of the employee who's referring and the current title of the individual. Oh, Amir, I think you're muted. I think we lost you.
Sorry.
You're good.
We have a question from Wendy. Do you want to take this one, Kira, please?
Sure. All right. So we have Wendy, and she is asking, how can you make sure you show a quick learner mindset in your answers whenever you're answering interview questions?
Great question, Wendy. It's having an example of how you've been able to learn quickly, and you were tasked with X, Y was your plan, and Z was the results of that plan. Examples and really key referencing and almost lifting up the hood and showing the parts and components to your playbook on who you are as a professional and how you like to work. I feel like now we're just in such a transparent world and such a cross-pollinated pipeline of talent that is from Gen Z to millennials to beyond, and to boomers who are still wanting skin in the game, that the way to establish how you really make sure you're a quick learner is having those examples top of mind that are the most relatable examples to the role that you're interviewing for. That's key. That's important. Because if it's an example that's not 100% on the money of what the role is that you're interviewing for, then it's going to be overlooked, unfortunately. And it's super important to just understand, again, sometimes questions are designed to throw you a little bit off your guard, but to stay disciplined, stay in the pocket, and just always have in the back of your mind how this example is going to be relevant to this role.
Excellent. Josh, Ruben asks from the Discord, mostly just curious, because you mentioned this topic of an emphasis on mobile expertise, what would be transferable, or how would a candidate talk about transferability from PC to mobile? And in this case, Ruben says, for example, I have more experience in making games for PC with Unity and Godot. Like, what are some candidates who've been able to voice that compatibility, Josh?
It's a fantastic question. I would say how you've continued to evolve with the technical side of development. So I think it's important when you read a job description, and for example, if you see a lot of C++, Unreal, you're able to speak to, even although I don't have mobile on my resume as you're looking at it, there are projects that I've been able to take on. There are friends within my network that I've been able to support. And there's a constant stream of information and vibe coding that I'm applying on my own time, where I'm staying up to par and I'm staying intact with the tools and the resources that are accessible. So if an opportunity comes and I'm able to showcase my skill set of what I know and what's on the table of learning, that's a great way to position it. Or even if there was a desktop version, or if there was a mobile app. I know there's a lot of candidates who reference some of the desktop style games, and there was a mobile component to it as well. We're not going to overlook that experience, but you do have to overemphasize how you've been able to continue to evolve and understand where the industry is going, and showcase the understanding of why mobile has been so lucrative and why it's being so sought out as an industry right now.
All right, so we have another question from Discord from, I think it's pronounced Colette. She wanted to ask about referrals, and as a new indie dev, how would you make the most out of your network, meet people and grow your network, and just build these professional relationships who could vouch for you in the future?
You got to show up where the community is in person. I think it's fantastic how gaming has always been at the forefront and at the cusp of technology digitally. And, we have examples like Discord and Reddit, and we have so many different streaming portals now and streaming platforms where, you can further expand your network. And even on LinkedIn, and there's meetups and there's communities and there's forums that you could join. But it's so important to have a human to human interaction with these individuals that you're networking with. And you're always going to have a story to reference, and you're always going to have a moment in time of where you met that individual. Like Amir, you just mentioned Don. Like, I'll never forget my interaction with Don from GameSpeed last week. And it was magical. And if he ever needs anything, I will drop everything and be there. So it's important to show up. And if it's not happening in your backyard, and maybe you're limited by where you're living in the world, create that moment. Try to go to your local stores, or try to go to your local meetups, or any events or any conferences that are remotely close to your interest in gaming, and buy a ticket and show up and invest. Because by you going and you investing in going, you're really not getting the most out of it unless you're going out there showcasing your badge around your neck or on your hip or wherever that is present and starting to meet new individuals. And I will find the gaming community next to the wrestling. I'm a big professional wrestling fan. Next to the professional wrestling community, it's just the strongest showcase of authenticity and support that I've ever seen. And there's an understanding when there's an answer to a question that might not be the exact outcome that you were netting out or you were mapping. So in my world, for example, if it's a job and I'm presented and pitched on the spot, and I unfortunately know within a second or two that I don't think it's going to work out, I'm still opening the door for that individual to connect with me on LinkedIn, look at other companies, look at other roles, and utilize me as a resource. And if they see anybody at a company that they're applying for that I know, I will be happy to continue to connect the dots for them. So invest in where the community is showing up in person.
That's great. And we had a question from Eric that maybe was a specific version of that, which I guess I'll ask because, again, you were at ABK, Josh. So Eric says, I'm actually applying for an intern role for Blizzard. I don't want to cold apply. I'm currently not in state, but I am willing to relocate. What's a good way to help break into Blizzard?
A great starting point is to look at, so LinkedIn is a library of individuals, and it is a library, and it is a knowledge bank of X employee holds Y title. So if you know that there's an internship on the engineering side at Blizzard, there's no stopping you from going on LinkedIn right now, looking at Blizzard and typing in intern next to it and filtering by people and seeing who's been there before as an intern, maybe who's converted, maybe who's running the internship program there. And you start there. You start to just continue to dabble in the resources of where people are publicly listed at the company, and you do your best to get a hold of them. I know it's hard when it's a cold outreach. That said, there's multiple individuals at these companies that and I always love to reference it as a multiverse. If there's superhero fans on the call, there's a multiverse, and there's many Spider-Man like me moments in the office where, oh my God, you're working on this marketing team for the global marketing team. Well, I'm doing this for the North America brand side, and we should absolutely cross-pollinate pipelines of talent if you're hiring for anything. So you never really know how it's going to happen. But the best thing you could do is continue to utilize, especially nowadays, you can ask Claude, you could ask ChatGPT to give me the best prompt to search on LinkedIn, on Indeed, on Discord, on X, of what employees are at a Y company. And my outcome of this is trying to be connected with someone. So that's how I would tackle that.
Perfect. I love that. We also have another question from Madeline, and she's going to kind of piggyback off of the previous question from Ruben about like the whole PC versus or mobile gaming. So she asks, if your experience mostly or all falls into PC console and you see a mobile gaming job that appeals to you, should you take the time to learn some more about mobile gaming development and make a small app for your portfolio? Or is it worthy to just apply and highlight any skills that might be transferable?
If it's more than a project, then yes. So what I mean by that is if you're building to test out your chops and see if it's possible that you can build something from scratch, that's fantastic, right? That shows that your willingness to learn is there. Now, if you're taking that project and that project catches a lot of momentum and it goes live on Steam, or you take the initiative and even launch it into the App Store, and now you find yourself as a founder of this app, now you're creating tangible experience, and now you're actually monetizing a small business that is more relatable and more of a powerful presentation to a recruiter or to a hiring manager that is looking for 6+ years in the mobile gaming experience. Now, if you could say I spent 10 years or 12 years plus as PC, AAA, and console, and because I knew the opportunities weren't presented internally enough for me to adapt or find a mobile foot in the door somewhere. I took it upon myself to utilize the technology around me. And I started this thing from zero. And now we're pacing towards 50 miles an hour, 60 miles per hour. And now you have a real business to reference. Projects are great, but projects don't represent a real tangible outcome. And you got to remember, guys, like businesses are always going to be evaluated on, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but when we evaluate performance reviews for all employees, and this is my HR experience kind of showcasing right now, you're going to be probed and you're going to be evaluated on value. And if the dollar amount that you're being compensated for is a return on the investment that the company is making in you. So if you're going to reference a project, make sure that project was beyond just a side project and it did materialize into something where it could actually be monetized and it's gained a lot of momentum, because then you're going to stop me in my tracks. You're going to stop the hiring manager on their tracks and say, whoa, you know what? That's highly entrepreneurial of that individual. And now it's to the point where they could scale it and they could almost go out and recruit their own dev teams or their own account executives or their own player support or community managers to really see if this thing could be up and running. And you know what? If it doesn't work, at least you could reference you went for it. And that's a real story. So that's what I would say to that question.
That's great. And then Zife from Discord asks, and I'll take a crack at this and invite either of you to add anything you like. How do you define Gen Z users and understand their preferences? Is there a specific framework that perspective or framework that guides your approach? So, Zife, what I would say is, so if we're thinking about Gen Z, we're thinking about, if I'm not mistaken, about 15 to 30. And so there's not a very easy delineation that you would have. Like, for example, look at Roblox, because most people in that age are going to be aged out. I would say that, as with anything that has to do with demographic profiling, doing it properly is very expensive, and you're getting into areas of user research and polling. What I often do if I'm looking at stuff like that is I often start with what's free out there. That includes stuff that you can find within Steam resources. It includes stuff you can go and find on sites like Kaggle, where people have data. There's often surveys and data from places like GDC and from the ESA that have data on users and these types of things. So I would say I always start with finding the best general resources, but to do any of that stuff properly, it has to be done probably for the specific instance of what game, what console, what profiles, and I think it actually gets pretty expensive and pretty involved. Anything you would add, team?
No, I think you summarized that perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Then we can go to Mohammed's one. Yep.
So we have another one from Discord. I think this one will be kind of a fun one. I'm interested in your response to this one. So they ask, early application versus referred application, and which one would have a better chance of landing the interview?
I know this is not going to be the most fun answer, but it's the honest answer. Whether it's a referral or whether it is the last resume to come in or whether it's the first resume to come in, it's always going to revert to how this story tees up for a perfect continuation of what they want next. And it really comes down to the experience, and it really comes down to the interviews. Now, I will say, if you see a role that's been open for 90 days, then they're either struggling with the search for that role, or they have gone through different cohorts of talent. And typically, and this is revealing, my strategy, I typically love to introduce 2 to 3 different cohorts. If we hit 3 or 4, then this is a very niche search that we're on, and it's a unicorn search. And, it's that you always got to reference to the leadership team. Like, this is costing us X amount of money to keep this role open. What's the true value if this hits the 6-month mark, and do we really need the role anymore? But to answer the question, it really comes down to how well articulated the resume and the experience and the buildup is to the role that you just applied for. And, I would utilize that timestamp of when the role went live, because it will give you some insight into how well the recruitment funnel and the recruitment process is going for that team and is going for that search. So if you see something at like the 30, 45 days ago, 60 days ago, you'd probably still have a strong shot, whether you were first applicant in or you were the number 90-day applicant out. If it goes beyond that, then I would say the same thing. I would say your chances of being discovered are just as highly. So, and now if you don't hear back and you applied, let's say day 20 it went live, and now it's 60 days later, they've most likely moved forward with a different cohort of talent.
Very interesting. And now from Discord, by the way, hi, Chris. Hello, James. Josue from Discord asks, since you are working at Mattel, were you aware of their past experience with gaming, like the Intellivision and so forth? And maybe actually I'll broaden out the question, Josh. Like, how much time did you spend either a priori or currently kind of really knowing the depth of Mattel's product portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I'm being challenged every day to report back to the history by the team. That said, it's operating within a new lens, and it's referencing publishers that were not around when we took a stab at the Intellivision. So it's a constant involvement of research, and it's a constant involvement of understanding the branding. We have, again, I'll reference a multiverse. We have such a wide multiverse of resources internally to reference. So for example, I work closely with our legal team, with our comms team, with our branding team, because there's an element of employer branding for the Mattel Digital Studio that, we're building from scratch, but we're also being super compliant with the history of the brand and the history of the IPs and how the IPs need to be accurately represented. So, it's a daily dose of history and knowledge that the more I'm equipped, the more I could be an extended branch of resourcing to candidates that are also seeing the brand, seeing the logo out there, saying, oh, Mattel, that's cool. I never really thought about that. And then it's on me to really present them the last 5 minutes of our conversation with how we're taking an 80-year-old IP and we see the opportunity because we found success with Mattel 163 and Uno. And we all know how successful Monopoly Go has been. One could argue Uno's a more stimulating game than Monopoly, but there's an opportunity on the table to really build out a self-publishing arm, and the revenue behind it is serious. It's real. So, it's again, accountability, and it is my responsibility to represent the company and know the history of it as best as I can. So hopefully that answered the question. That was a good one.
It's so funny. Before the next question, I have to say, I was like, one that made me chuckle is I was in Target or something a while back, and I'm sure many of others have seen this. They had from Monopoly, they had a free parking expansion pack to Monopoly. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting old. There's DLC for Monopoly now. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's but that's a perfect example, Amir. You're blending history with creating new history. Yeah. So so it's good. You got to know your history to be truly representative of what you can do, and how you can evolve. So that was a fantastic question, Chris. Thank you.
All right. So another question from Discord. They ask, after bringing up Activision Blizzard King, despite them being owned by Microsoft, if you could not seek a position after applying to them, do you think having connections with those who work at Xbox and Bethesda could help? So I'm guessing this is more like cross-company connections versus like in-company connections, possibly.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to reference back to utilizing LinkedIn to see who they're connected with, who the individuals are connected with, whether that's internal or whether that is cross-pollinated or that is the sister branch or the baby brother branch. But there should be an internal network or an internal communication portal or an internal directory where you are able to still find employee on Y division and Z amount of years that they've been there. So, if the question is really, can I refer to somebody? Can I reach out to somebody from LinkedIn who's now connected to this broader Microsoft world that Activision is also under? The answer is yes. There's a directory internally where you should be able to find that information, and you should be able to go on a search and be able to identify the individuals on that team. Now, again, it's asking a lot of that individual that so you better make sure that you're close with them, and it's not somebody that you just met or you found on LinkedIn, because it is going to require a little bit of a hunt for them to pinpoint who exactly on that team is the go-to. But ultimately, you should be able to find who that individual is. Like TikTok, for example, there was the UK version of you, there was the APAC version of you, there was the New Zealand, Australia team version of you. So, again, that Spider-Man meme moment, there's somebody on another team doing the same type of work or the same style of work, and they're there. They're definitely there, but it's a hunt to find them.
Great, Josh. Another one from Discord. I'll open this up, and I have a small thought I'll share, but of course I want to let you take first privilege on this, which is Ryan asks, a lot of Gen Z are very worried about AI. That's an understatement of the year, Ryan. How can someone use that to their advantage? Why don't I even open that up to you a little bit more broadly, Josh? Like, why don't I let you opine on anything you feel comfortable or wanting to share about AI in candidates, AI and candidate preparedness? I mean, Please just share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we're heading in the direction, and this is just my take and my opinion, but it almost feels like we're heading in this direction where there's an AI resume reviewer that's producing a product for you, and now there's resources on the recruitment end for the AI review and matching of the resume to the actual job itself. And then you go as far as there's tools and there's agents that are available that are AI driven on the recruitment front that can talk to you sorry, my thumbs up. They can talk to you as AI. It's an AI conversation that's already prompted with what they're looking for. And then there's AI scheduling. So there's almost a world that I feel like we're heading in where if you lose track and you become overly dependent on AI for the job search, you're never really having it's AI to AI. It's not human to human anymore. And I think at its purest form, a healthy hire is a human to human interaction. So I wouldn't be overly spooked by it, to be honest. If anything, you want to utilize it for your efficiency and your preparation. Like, I think a fantastic way of preparing with AI is you could full on do an interview with AI, and you could say, treat me as if I've been an account executive for 7 years with an ad tech company, and now I'm interviewing for a senior or director level account executive or account management position, and I want you to drill into the questions as if I'm interviewing for it. And that's a fantastic example of utilizing AI. But I wouldn't be overly spooked. If anything, you just have to be fully aware that there's tools that are available, and there might be some companies out there that are still exploring. I mean, I just attended a conference last Sunday, and then parts of it on Monday that was all directors and all VPs of talent. And, across the room, I could confidently say, it's not confidential, but I could confidently say, we're still figuring out how to utilize AI in recruitment. And the most efficient way and honestly, the legally responsible way of handling it is not losing sight of the human to human interaction and storytelling and connecting. And if we become overly dependent on it, you could be reviewing and sending out a resume that AI generated for you that looks fantastic, but there's things that could be populating in the ATS that are missing, from a grid view that is not accurately representing the role or you. And even though you thought that the resume that you put together with it was going to help you, sometimes it won't. So don't become overly reliant on it, but become overly confident in its capability and always be able to reference on how it can make your skill set that much more enhanced.
That's a great answer, Josh. And friends, I would just add something briefly, which is, something I talk about a lot, and I'm sure many of you heard me give this spiel, is about the idea of positive versus normative frameworks. And what all that means is what is in reality versus what we wish things were. A year and a half ago, one of the few times where I've gotten a lot of pushback on something that I said, it actually doesn't happen too often, thank God, was I said, aside from what you personally believe and how strongly you may believe or not believe in AI, and that's deeply respected, I believe every person should be aware of and familiar with what the AI tools are for what their field of work is for two reasons. One, because the more empowered and informed you are, if you want to make things that protect the human element of things or protect humans, I think being better informed is better than being worse informed.
Mm-hmm.
And the second statement is that you may be in different workplaces and they may have different expectations. I can tell everybody here, and I am not personalizing this to any organization, just take it as the general comment that it is, as someone who sees a lot of organizations. Many organizations in this world now in May 2026 are explicitly or strongly moving towards explicitly requiring people to basically use AI tools or even
Yeah.
having KPIing to what extent you use tokens or AI stuff. And so that does not stop me for a single day. And I know our mod team like Kira, I know friends like Josh. It doesn't stop my conscientiousness of fighting for labor and for people in this industry every single day. But I truly believe that increasingly the days of putting one's head in the sand like an ostrich and hoping that it'll all go away, even though I wish I could do that sometimes myself, I don't know whether that's a tenable strategy anymore.
Beautifully said. And just to add on to that, Amir, what I saw at ByteDance was a true metric of efficiency, and I feel like that's just going to be a continued narrative that is coming from across the pond and seeping its way more into the global economies that we continue to just participate in as professionals. That when you look at efficiency, it's basically the narrative of how you do more with less. And I don't say that to spook you all on this session tonight, saying that jobs are at risk here. If anything, it should be empowering to want to learn these technologies, because if there comes a time where a team that used to be funded of 8 to 12 headcount has now reduced down to half of that, and now you're looking at a team of 4 to 5, all 4 or 5 of those employees who are still with the company are going to be more efficient if they know AI, and that's now part of their arsenal of how to summarize something within a second or how to put together a deck within 2 minutes, because now you've added the skill of properly prompting to get the most output and efficiency for the company. So, that I just want to be hyper transparent around that there is a metric that does hold a lot of weight and does hold a lot of value, especially depending on the company size. And another thing to be mindful of when you're applying for roles, is it a public company? And how does the public market sway the revenue and the investment in future divisions within the team's growth or the company's growth? And these are all questions to ask yourself, is this the type of pressures that I want to be operating under? Or is there a startup where I could go be a big fish in a small pond? And the beautiful thing is, as spooky of a narrative as one can argue that it's becoming, the other side of that is, I think this is one of the biggest renaissance periods in the history of time. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity for a lot of professionals to own a golden lane within any organization that they're part of, by being first to market within AI. So, like, for example, if there's an AI project that comes up within recruitment, I'm absolutely throwing my hand up there, because I see what Claude could do. I see what ChatGPT could do. To Amir's point, there's a lot of enterprise deals that are cut within these companies, and there's a strong investment to up level each employee that is currently there to utilize the investment in AI. So, yeah, embrace it versus be scared of it.
All right. So I'm going to steer the topic or the conversation in a little bit of a new direction. And I feel like this is probably on the minds of a lot of different people. It's honestly on the mind of myself as well, and this kind of relates a little personally. But um, what would you suggest for niche specialists looking to return to games industry after leaving it for a while? For example, this person, they work in user experience research and they've struggled to find work due to the rarity of those positions. So they work outside of games to pay bills, and they feel like their time away has made it a little bit harder to land a consistent UX job. Do you have any tips for a UX specialist or really anyone just looking for like a specific job whenever they have a set time away from it because of the difficulty in finding these?
It's always a cherry on top if you're a true gamer at the core, and you're able to amplify that through the recruitment process or the conversations that you're having with, whether it's with the hiring manager or whether that's with the recruiter. And what I mean by that is, if you're able to say like, hey, I took a break because financially it made sense at the time, and I wanted to expand my palette, but now I see the world continuing to narrow in on the lanes of professionals, and those who continue to stay the course tend to be the ones who are rewarded the most and continuously have these leaps in their careers. And if you're able to speak to that and you're able to address that as, I never lost the skill set. If anything, I refined a more broad way of approaching a situation when it pops up, or a research topic when it occurs, that by nature, because I'm so passionate about gaming, I could easily jump back into that headspace. And it's really on you to showcase how you never really lost a pep in your step or a skip in your step, and you're able to really jump right back in to where you left off, almost as if you're riding a bike. So, I think it's got to come from a true place, and it's got to come from, again, a story that makes it make sense for anybody that you're speaking with, and organically it's piercing through their ears to where they're like, you know what, who wouldn't have made that jump in that moment in time? So that'd be my answer.
That was a good transition there. Actually, this is good. We're actually starting to get a lot of kind of really different questions, which is fun. So here's one from Discord, and maybe if you'll indulge me, Josh and Kira, I'll give 30 seconds of commentary and then let both of you jump in. So Andre asks, let's see. Do you see XR, VR, AR development across both mobile and desktop as a worthy investment for the future, something worth investing in time in, learning, and adding to the portfolio? Andre, what I would say very quickly on this is, I never like to say nearly anything is worthwhile or not worthwhile. I like to think of things as kind of apples to apples, of have they become easier or harder or more or less worthwhile over time. And when it comes to XR, AR, VR, I would basically say two things to you. One is that there is no question in my mind that, unfortunately, and sadly, many of us have been party to friends and colleagues of this, we've seen the cuts in Meta, we've seen the pullbacks in things like the metaverse. And I think a lot of the general concept, XR, VR, AR things around the metaverse and general usage seem to be declining relative to the past. The other thing that I would say is VR definitely has potential, and I am far from an XR expert, although I have many friends who are. And what those friends tell me is that if anything is going to get there in the longer term, it probably is more the AR side of it versus the VR side of it, because a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, don't love or don't have high use of VR headsets. It makes them nauseous, it's restricting, it has cables and so forth. But like the last thing I'll say, and I promise I'll stop, is the kind of Jerry Maguire thing, right? Of like, show me the money. Whenever anyone says to me, is XYZ platform, genre, whatever, worthwhile? What I say to them is, go look how many units are being sold on that platform and how many titles. And if you do that, you'll see that there are definitely VR success stories. But if you move off the top 5, top 10 titles, unit sales really start to drop off really, really quickly. So Is it worthwhile? I would absolutely not say it's unworthwhile, but I would say the relative ease of making a success in that platform area of development has become harder than it used to be. Does that jive with you, Josh?
Sorry, I had I had a little surprise from the dogs and the 2.5-year-old. He knows I unlock doors, guys. He's 2.5. It's crazy. Yeah, I was listening to everything you were saying. I couldn't agree more. And I was just going to add, there's an element of being an economist that I would, as we operate throughout this life and we continue to see what's happening around us, whether it's, you know, within geopolitically or whether it's just geoeconomical, like there's an element to understanding a business, and AR has already proven on a mobile platform that it could be taken to a very serious conversation to where it's I mean, Pokemon Go, it was a hit and it's still up and running. And Pokemon Go is a beautiful example of, if you were part of that ride, you're heavily rewarded for that ride, and you rode it out and you continue to be the go-to. So things will fluctuate in peaks and dips and roller coaster moments of spins and climbs. But I agree with Amir on this. Like VR, it's still not 100% there. But if you're within a company where it's being utilized in a safe place that is providing a solid stream of revenue, like that, the economist side of you's got to be dialed into the pursuit of wanting to continue on in that venture. I think VR games are great, but like you said, the nauseating piece and this at scale, it's not at the level of mobile. And if we look at the global numbers for the gaming industry, mobile's making up a majority chunk of that, and it's for a reason. So, AR is where I would focus my efforts, but you could argue VR in the healthcare space is just as utilized and just as hot of an area. And if that's something that you could take a break and park your gaming desirability for VR and want to focus it on still catering to the needs of let's say retail, for example, commercial real estate, walkthroughs for, buying homes, healthcare, these are all sectors that aren't the sexiest to be operating in. It's not gaming, but it's still a necessity for those companies to be working. And if those companies are securing enterprise deals and you're looking at their financials, it makes sense to pursue it. So I think it does require just understanding a little bit more around how the business is performing.
Everybody, Kira's well pointed out to me that with 8 minutes left, we'll just try to do a few more. We'll definitely do 2 more. We'll try to squeeze in 3 more. Kira, please go right ahead.
All right. So have another one from Discord, and this is another question about whenever you worked at Blizzard. So during your time there, were there times where you had to balance working on each studio's respective intellectual properties?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? There were times that I had to respect the IP. Yeah, absolutely. Like I came in the back door through King. So at the time it was called King Ads, and we were solely focused on essentially building the agency within Activision for mobile ad placements and just being able to take on the portfolio of King games and utilize those at the forefront of putting our sellers out there to go to market and try to utilize the real estate within the mobile game. So like Candy Crush was our bread and butter, and our, it was our horse in the race that we could always rely on. So, but then there was big talks of Call of Duty Mobile at the time. So, to answer that question, yeah, I mean, you gotta be mindful of which IP is going to have its moment, and you have to also be forward thinking in the sense of, how agnostic it's going to be to the audience and to the device that it's going to be broadcasted on. So, if we look at what we're doing right now with Mattel, starting next week, you're going to be able to see the first self-published title that we put out. And, it's going to be paired with a masterful cinematic adventure that's also going to be behind that. And, it makes a ton of sense, right? There's a big movie release. There's a game that could be tied to that as an extension of the fandom, and the true fans that want to consume it, they will. And, there's definitely a balance of IP that you have to sort through, and you have to prioritize, again, financially on, does this make sense to do this now, or does Candy Crush get the focus, or does Call of Duty Mobile get the focus? So yeah, there was definitely a prioritization list internally.
Great, Josh. This is one I'm really happy was asked from Discord, because we actually have never asked this question. I get asked this a lot. So
Okay.
This candidate says, so how can someone like me, when they're reaching out to recruiters or hiring managers, I'm trying to break into the industry. I actually am genuinely good faith, trying to build a genuine relationship with them while networking. But I don't want to come across as yet another person who's overly needy, transactional, bugging them. What are some way candidates can actually provide value or make recruiters' job easier, or just build a real relationship with them in trying to reach out to them?
Yeah. Put in a little bit more time to research the bio of the individual you're reaching out to. And, a fun one that I have, if you all go to my LinkedIn and you check out, my bio, there's a lot of hip hop references in there. I mentioned that I'm a meditation coach. I even have a playlist for a little blog that I was doing at TikTok that it's kind of faded away, but I'll pick it back up. It was called, it was Culture and Careers. And some of the more organic ways I've been reached out to is like, hey, I noticed that you're a hip hop head. Obviously, I'm here to network professionally, but here's a playlist if you ever wanted to check it out. And I think that's amazing. I think that's okay. They want to invest some time, relate on a music sense, and me will in as a result of that will check out the playlist, get a little bit of more of an understanding of the individual, and then I will invest into looking into their resume, and I will invest into reaching out to them and say, hey, that was very cool of you. Let's find 10 minutes, let's find 15 minutes and just chat. Even if this doesn't work out for a role immediately, I'd still love to stay connected. And you know what? The individuals who have done that, some have even led to, going out on the golf course or going to play a pickleball game or going to a concert together. So there's ways of getting a hold and getting the attention of individuals that don't always have to be professional. It just requires a little bit of bio research.
All right. So I kind of want to ask my own question and weave this in a little bit because I've heard other people kind of talk about it as well. So those who have college degrees on their resumes or their portfolios and reference either projects they did in school or, even just like class projects, as maybe their only experience. Some people are curious if going to school for games is even worth it or if it does help leverage on their resumes or not. What would your thoughts be on this?
Yeah, I think there's not a more powerful example of an education that has a carved out path. Now, I will say some programs have a stronger alumni than others. So, for example, I was at USC 2 weeks ago. We have a strong, if you want to reference like NIL to NFL portal relationship with USC. Gordon Bellamy, for example, like he's a staple in the industry, and he's got an amazing story on how he found his way into EA and how he just became one of the biggest names in EA. And you could see him on a lot of documentaries. I was so blown away when I was there because not only was it a showcase of the games, but each of these teams, and there was probably 20 games there, each of these games had teams of 40 to 50 students. And these students were introducing themselves as, I was the producer, I was the senior designer on all the levels, and I was the 2D designer. So I absolutely think if you're going to go to school for something, having a dedicated carved out path behind it and pursuit, it all ties into your story. So, Full Sail, for example, like before we even jumped on this call tonight, Full Sail's got I remember when it was a small school in Orlando. Now it's made nationwide, exposure, and there are a lot of healthy alumni and placements that have come out of that. I do think it's just an interesting time in the world to try to land something if you haven't been able to compile that professional experience and getting that foot in the door. it might not be a gaming experience right off the bat, which might go back to that question around how do I take a path that brings me back to gaming. It might have to happen if that means that you're going to be able to compile some professional skills under your belt and professional experience under your belt to then revert it back to, your foundation and your education. So I absolutely think it's still valuable, and you should, if given the opportunity, and if you even have that foresight when you're that young to be able to pursue a path like that, I think it carries a lot of weight.
I love that.
Because I'll tell you what, I didn't know I was going to be a recruiter when I graduated. I thought I was going to be a talent buyer at Live Nation. I went the path of event management, and you know what? A lot of my jobs in college and a lot of my internships were hospitality driven, and I think that's one of the most critical pieces of being a successful recruiter. I understand hospitality and I understand customer service, and if you're a good person and you're genuine and you care about the outcome for that individual, you have to in the hospitality world. So I didn't know it at the time, but that is one of those pieces of my educational background that I think has put me in the position and on the path to where I am now. So even though it wasn't as dedicated as recruiting, because there is no recruiting path in any university, if I could go back and focus all my efforts on being like a producer, and I know that there's a college out there that I could spend 4 years of my career learning and having projects that are only focused on things that I want to learn, it's just a matter of time until it happens for you professionally. So don't give up on that. I'm a believer in education.
There's no standard path, folks. 38 for me, 17 years. You want the non-standard path. It's spending 5 years in graduate school for healthcare. That's what you do to work in the video game industry. Anyway, everybody, I want to say thank you so very much to Kira, who's just wonderful, to Josh. I've had many interactions with them, and what you're seeing tonight is what I've known him as a person in every interaction. Thank you to everyone who stayed through of all of this. I hope you all feel a little bit wiser with these great answers. And I promised Justin I would end the show on the Konami code. So up, down, left, right, BA select, start 30 lives, yo. And that's our show.
I love it. Thanks all.